Ryan Day's job might be saved by the 12-team playoff.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Oh, yes, it's that time once again for another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view post. More craziness. Did you expect anything else? I mean, at this point, you should just plan for chaos every single week. This is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with this unequivocally the greatest sport on planet Earth. This episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Arizona State, oh boy, Arizona State is playing for a Big 12 championship. Are you ready for that? I'm ready for that. It's going to be really fun. And how many teams is the SEC getting into the playoff? At one point, it looked like 5. It's not going to be 5. Is it going to be 3? Is it going to be 2? I'll discuss that later after Texas got the win in the rivalry 13 years in the making. But nobody's happier about the 12-team playoff than Ryan Day. How in the world did you lose that football game? How? Look, Miami lost, and that was shocking. In a way, they were up 21-0 and they came back. But let me tell you, the surprise factor on that Miami collapse was about a 6, maybe even a 5. Heck, it might have even been Miami's defense been terrible all year. Oh, look, they let Cam Ward down again. They are the Oklahoma teams under Lincoln Riley. They are completely and utterly one-sided with a Heisman finalist quarterback, and that's it. They've got a better run. I think those Oklahoma teams actually ran the ball pretty darn well. This is, I think, a perfect comparison. They're not going to win a national championship because they can't stop Syracuse, who, by the way, is a good team. What a win for Fran Brown and the Syracuse Orange. But the shock factor that Syracuse overcame a 21-point deficit, for those who have been paying attention, like myself this year, is about a 5. The shock factor that Michigan beat Ohio State in the horseshoe is about 15. I cannot believe I have spent the entire day doing many other tasks in my professional life, and I can't get out of my head, oh my gosh, Michigan won that football game. How did they let that happen? The reshuffling and injuries along the Ohio State offensive line clearly mattered because that Michigan defensive front controlled the game. Ohio State runs for 72 yards, and boy, they were dead set on it. They were dead set on running the football and not trusting Will Howard in big spots. 3rd and 10, let's call a draw. Let's not throw to our trio of NFL caliber wide receivers. Let's see if we can run the ball up and down the field. I don't know if they were trying to make a statement or if they saw something schematically. Whatever it was wrong. It was absolutely wrong. That is the worst loss of the Ryan Day era, and his seat would be legitimately hot if not for the playoff. The playoff's going to save it. You can call for his job as much as you want. You can be as frustrated, and Ohio State fans, you got every right to be frustrated. This is a reset year for Michigan. They're a 7-5 football team that lost to Illinois, that could have lost to Minnesota, that got blown out by Oregon, that lost to Washington, who's 6-6. That's who this Michigan team is. And you couldn't beat them at home? With what some described before the season as the best roster in college football? $20 million or so in NIL, and you can't beat Michigan? Ryan Day's got a Michigan problem now. He had one before, but it has elevated itself. This is no longer, he's got a problem. No, he has an existential terror. And it came to a head, and it got ugly at the end. Are we surprised? A flag tries to get planted, and then chaos ensues, and pepper spray is used to try to quiet everything down. Are you surprised? That's how much it meant to Ohio State. That's how much it meant to Michigan. That's why that rivalry is so great. But the 12-team playoff's going to save them because you are not. I don't care how upset you are. Ohio State fans. I don't care what you think of Ryan Day. There is no way a coach who has one Big Ten loss to a newcomer, Oregon, this year, in his 4 years as a head coach, 4 or 5, whatever it's been, outside of Michigan, there is no way you're going to fire that guy if he's in the college football playoff. Ohio State could win the national championship this year. I bet you'd still have people calling for Ryan Day's job. But Ohio State comes into this game ranked number 2 in the country. They're not falling out of the playoff. They're absolutely not. They have a road win at Penn State, who's top 5 going to the Big Ten championship game to face Oregon because of all this madness. And they've got a win against Indiana, who is a top 10 team, and they beat them soundly. By the way, did you see what Indiana just did to Purdue? That was illegal in 52 states, okay? And borderline illegal in the other 13. So the Ohio State situation is the most fascinating thing I have ever seen. Because this is inexcusable. There is nothing you can say. There's nothing you can rationalize, nothing you can justify. I don't care if you had 5 backups along the offensive line. There's no way you should lose that football game. You're at home. I don't care how good the defense is. I don't care how many kicks your kicker is missing. You should not walk away with 10 points. It's a great Michigan defense. That should be the reason you don't score 30 points, not the reason you can't get to 20 or 17. 17 points would have won this game, and they couldn't get it done. Absolutely flabbergasted that Ohio State failed to win that football game. That is a horrific display of coaching. Sharon Moore just took Ryan Day to the woodshed, beat him, and left him there overnight, hazing style. That was unbelievable. I still can't believe it. And then there's Miami. There's just not the same level of shock here. I said going into this game, Syracuse and the points. I had that a lot this week. Michigan and the points, Syracuse and the points, but not the outright upset. This is why you play the games. You know what this game is just another example of? Here's an argument that you've heard in college football, particularly from the SEC part of the country, that has literally no meaning, no bearing, cannot ever be used in a college football discussion once again when discussing any sort of hypothetical, this, that, and the other thing, how would it play out? So-and-so would be a 14-point favorite. It doesn't matter. Vegas can choose whatever line they want. One team may very well be capable of winning by X amount of points, but LSU, sorry, I jumped to LSU. I don't know why. Freudian slip, perhaps. Ole Miss lost at home as a 17.5-point favorite. Bama on the road, 20-plus point favorite, lost the game outright. Michigan, 20.5-point underdog, one of the biggest underdog upset wins of all time. This season of college football, more than anything else, has completely, and I'm glad it has placed the utmost importance on the results that happen on the field, because no one can come at you and have a rational point whose crux of the argument is, well, they'd be a 12-point favorite against this team on a neutral field. Who cares? Who cares? I don't. I don't care. Is it interesting to talk about and see what Vegas thinks of these teams? Yes, but the results are becoming increasingly clear. When you look at NFL point spreads, they're typically under a touchdown. And the average NFL point spread is probably in like the 3 to 5 range. 3 to 5 is the new 10 to 14 in college football. One team could go on to win by 30 if they're the favorite. But there is no guarantee that you're going to win. There is no lock. There's none of that. Because we're watching these double-digit underdogs who people look at and then crystallize in their mind, oh, well, this team might not cover, but certainly they're going to win. No, this is happening every single week. Ole Miss, 10.5-point favorite at Florida, lost. Ole Miss, 17.5-point favorite, lost. Bama, lost. Michigan, beat Ohio State. Over, and Miami loses to Syracuse. Like, you just cannot possibly introduce that argument into college football anymore. You can't. And you know what? I'm glad, because that places an incredibly high emphasis on the results on the field. The results on the field should matter above all else. Not hypothetical point spreads, not who would do this or who would do that. Don't care. Really, really don't. What an incredible day of college football. Rivalry week delivered. Who would have thought? Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. So, remember that time Arizona State was picked to finish last? They're the perfect embodiment of my predictions for most Big 12 teams. Most. Not all. Most. My energy and sentiment is correct. It's just not aggressive enough. Arizona State picked to finish last. That's ridiculous. That's not going to happen. Arizona State could win the Big 12. Talk about taking a team to the woodshed. They took Arizona, ran them out of their own stadium. That wasn't particularly close. Thoughts on the Big 12 coming up next. Actually, before I get to the Big 12 and all the madness over there, 10-2 Miami. Do you think that should be a playoff team? I do. I absolutely do. Because if you had a 10-2 SEC, you'd say, oh yeah, they should absolutely be in. Show me the big gap between the SEC and the ACC. Where is it? Where is it? In light of Georgia Tech hanging with Georgia legitimately, and the other wins the ACC's got over the SEC, Miami thumped Florida earlier this year. Do you remember that? I remember that one. Cal went into Auburn. And Auburn beat Texas A&M, who's about to play in the conference championship game. There's just a lot of parity in college football out there. So 10-2 Miami, I do think should be in the college football playoff, given the 12-team format. That's not the playoff structure that I would set up. I would have preferred that game served as an elimination game. But I don't always get my way. I'm going to stop griping about it. It's the world that we live in, not the world that I would like to have. But 10-2 Miami, yeah, I think they should be in the playoff. Will they be? I don't know. What do you do with those three SEC teams? I'll talk about that later in the show. But coming up next, the Big 12, because it's great. Coming up right now, Game Time. You know why? Because Game Time's the best place to get tickets. Do you want to see your favorite teams play live? Do you want to go to conference championship games? Tickets are available. Do you want to go to bowl games? Tickets will be available. Do you want to go to playoff games? Tickets will be available. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Whatever you're looking for, they've got it. And all-in pricing? Yeah, you toggle this feature and you get shown your total up front. So you don't have these surprise last-minute fees at checkout. You go, wait, that's way more expensive than I thought it was going to be. Nope. Game Time wants to be honest with you. They take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It is game time. What's the value of a preseason poll? To set expectations. Not always the correct expectations, but some form of expectations. It's Arizona State, it's Iowa State in the Big 12 championship game. So Iowa State was a team who some of us saw as, yeah, they can win the Big 12. Don't know if they will, but they could. One of these teams is going to the playoff. One of these teams, I'm not a huge 12-team playoff guy. Absolute unquestioned positive is that one of Tempe, Arizona or Ames, Iowa are going to be represented in the college football playoff. How are they going to fare once they get there? I don't know. I don't know who they're going to play just yet, but we don't need to think about such things because the conference championship game is still to be had. And Arizona State being there is pretty incredible. Kenny Dillingham has taken that program from dormant to thriving as well as it ever has. They appeared in one, maybe two Pac-12 championship games. I think it was two. They didn't win either one of them. If they go out in his second season, a year after they were 3-9, when they dealt with the Jaden Rashada situation off the field and the sanctions and everything like that they had to go through. This guy has got real Coach of the Year capability written all over him. I think he's already in the running. I think he's got to be up there. Yeah, you have to put Deion Sanders in that conversation. Boy, Kurt Cignetti at Indiana is hard to overlook, isn't he? But Kenny Dillingham, if he wins a conference championship, this wasn't supposed to happen. Yeah, picking them last was always a ridiculous thing by the Big 12 media. It was all, but for me, if I did a Big 12 media preseason poll, if they'd given me a vote for that, I don't think I would have picked him in the top 10. I wouldn't have picked him 16th. Probably in the 11 to 12 range. This is an astonishingly successful season for Kenny Dillingham and company. And it's a testament to a couple of things. First of all, don't ever tell me that someone is crazy for taking a particular Power 4 job. If you are a great coach, if you are really as good as you think you are in your head, you can win anywhere. Tempe, Arizona, sanctions it's been a sleeping giant forever. Kenny Dillingham has woken it up. It looks like a job. I don't know what they're going to do in the offseason recruiting. I'm excited to find out. Arizona State fans should be excited to find out. Anytime a coach takes a job, why would he go over there? Why would he take this job? Because If you have these sorts of stories, you're not just fulfilling your own life, you're fulfilling the lives of thousands and thousands of people in a place that for Kenny Dillingham, he holds really dear. But what has Curt Cignetti done to Indiana? Kirk Herbstreit was talking about, I think it was Kirk Herbstreit, was talking about how Curt Cignetti, as much as anything, had to go to Bloomington and he had to shock the fan base to get into it. He had to say, hey, you can be good. Screw all these other guys. They suck. That was as much a shot to get attention to the program as it was an energy to permeate throughout the fan base to say, hey, we could do this. We can absolutely do it. So you've got a job, like the UCF job is now open. Gus Malzahn is going to be the offensive coordinator at Florida State. You may look at UCF and say, it's a tough job. Boy, it's difficult. Not if you're the right guy. Not if you have an idea of what you are doing. So any job can be a good job or at least a good enough job because this turnaround is shockingly good. Shockingly good. Conclusion number 2 from Arizona State. There is more than one way to build a championship program. Arizona State got hit in the transfer portal. Remember, Jaden Rashada left. Outsiders might have saying, oh boy, couldn't keep him around. Well, Sam Leavitt was better. He beat him out in fall camp. And they said, yeah, if you want to hit in spring camp, you want to hit the transfer portal? Go for it. Kenny Dillingham didn't hold any ill will. Kenny Dillingham publicly stated, this is a great guy. Whoever gets him in the transfer portal is getting an outstanding young man. Kenny Dillingham's a stand-up sort of guy. He will sink his teeth in. He will be 10 toes down, and he will say, I am all in right here, right now. But they haven't gone and revolutionized their roster in the portal. They're doing it with good old-fashioned coaching. I know this is a novel concept, perhaps. Colorado brought in a bunch of transfers. They got it going to a championship level in their second year. Indiana brought in a bunch of transfers. Conference championship contender in year 1. Kenny Dillingham? They've brought in guys. They've worked the portal. They have certainly made a number of key moves. But they have focused on development and player retention. Cam Skattebo, who Nick Saban described as his favorite player in college football, he's not the only one who would say that, by the way. Cameron Skattebo began his career at Sacramento State. That's an FCS program and a darn good one. A darn good one. He goes to Arizona State. They go 3-9, but he impresses people. I don't have firsthand knowledge or second or even third-hand knowledge of what transpired in the offseason. I would bet every dollar that I have made this year that he had offers to go elsewhere. But do you know who convinced him to stay? Kenny Dillingham and company. And what is he? Oh, that's right. At the center of a cultural revolution in Tempe to get them to the conference championship game. You could say, well, Joel Klatt said the other day on Colin Cowher's show, Deion Sanders has revolutionized college football. Well, on the one hand, yes, that is true. And that is one way to build a program and get a turnaround moving in the right direction. On the other hand, look at what Kenny Dillingham's doing at Arizona State. That's not a revolutionary concept. It's kind of old school, but he's got a new school flair to it. And I think it's a great thing to see. So next question I have, Iowa State plays well. They beat Kansas State. They're meeting Arizona State. This is going to be a great football game. Just a great football game. Are we sure the Big 12 is locked into just the one playoff spot? Are we 110% certain there is no possible way? Probably. And you know what? I think it stinks at some level because BYU, who knocked off Houston, Colorado almost snuck into the Big 12 championship game, but BYU said, no, we want to have a 10-win season. That still matters, and you never know. I don't know what happens at 10-2. You probably don't get a huge bump as the number 19 team in the country beating an unranked and under 500 Houston team. At least I wouldn't think so. I mean, Tulane lost ahead of you. You have all these other 9-3 teams, but the perception of the Big 12 and the perception of the ACC is still weaker in the SEC. And I think some of that's valid. I just don't think the gap should be viewed anywhere near as large as it once was. But for the Big 12 to be a one-bid league, which I remember saying all the way back in January, and took a lot of flack for that. Here we are, Big 12, going to be a one-bid league. Iowa State beating Kansas State, maybe it propels them. It's a top 25 win, but are they going to jump 5 spots? No, I suspect not. The mission for the Big 12 is to prevent this from happening again in the future, to not have a world in which you don't have a bunch of 10-2 teams, 2 and 3 loss teams, but to have a world where the college football community looks at a 10-2 BYU and they get more playoff consideration than they are about to receive. It takes a lot of work. It might take years before you get there, but it'll be worth it for the Big 12 in the long run. That's going to take you're going to have to clear a lot of mental hurdles for people, but it can be done. I think we're about to see it. The ACC took a major step forward this year. I think we're absolutely going to see that when the final college football playoff rankings come out. Big 12 is a 1-bid league. ACC could get up to 3. If Clemson wins the ACC championship, I think that's a 3-bid league. Without it, I think that's a 2-bid league. And good for the ACC. Big 12 didn't quite have that sort of season this year. Doesn't mean they can't in the future. And I think that'll matter eventually. Not immediately, not next year, maybe not even the year after, but eventually. I think those chickens can come home to roost in a positive way. So, speaking of conferences, Texas beat Texas A&M. Well, I expected that to happen. It's a huge win for Texas. They've secured their spot in the playoff. How many other SEC teams are joining them? Well, the number of teams where you go, oh, yep, they're in, and it's a team from the SEC, that seems to be shrinking. So how many is it? That's coming up next. First, let's talk about FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. $5, that's all it takes to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And if you want to bet these college football games, if you think you know how it's playing out, by all means, FanDuel.com, that's the place to go. $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel.com, that's the place to go. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more, not less, more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, SEC, let's have a chat. Texas A&M was an opportunity to expand the number of SEC teams getting into the playoff. Instead, we are condensing like a black hole, collapsing in on itself. Is that the right verbiage? I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I wasn't an actor on The Big Bang Theory either. So we'll just kind of run with you here. But Miami's sitting there at 10-2. SMU's sitting there 11-1. SMU's in. SMU's got to be in. I said before the year, if you're an 11-win Power 4 team, you should absolutely be in the playoff. And guess what? SMU should be in the college football playoff. Doesn't matter if they beat Clemson in the ACC championship game, which is where things will get complicated. So Clemson loses to South Carolina. They lose an incredible football game. Gamecocks are feeling great. 9-3. They might be the hottest team in college football right now. Lenore Sellers is playing out of his mind. Shane Beamer saying, oh, he's the best player in the country. And boy, he looks like it at times. He is darn near impossible to tackle. But with Texas beating Texas A&M, and by the way, what have I said all year about Texas? Their defense is the most underrated unit in the country. Well, people are starting to recognize that, and the defense didn't allow a point in this game. Quinn Ewers pick 6. That's the only touchdown for Texas A&M. And it's a fine season for Mike Elko and company. 8-4, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with 8-4 in the first year. Competitive loss to Notre Dame, playoff team. Competitive loss to Texas, playoff team. And losses elsewhere. Like, it's just, they did fine. They did absolutely fine. Yeah, you got upset by Auburn. Welcome to the SEC. It's hard to play football. There are a lot of good teams. No great dominant ones, but a lot of really good football teams in the SEC this year. So how many teams does the SEC get in? Well, I see 3 minimum. Tennessee was impressive. Tennessee, I'll talk more about the Vols next week. But they're flying under the radar right now. They're 10-2. They're not playing in the SEC championship game. They're absolutely in. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Tennessee into the college football playoff. They ran the football well against Vandy. Yeah, we knew they could do that. They threw it well against Vandy. They got down, and you thought, uh-oh, where's that first half Tennessee offense to score no points? Oh, what do you know? Covered a 10.5-point spread on the road, down 14-0 in 5 minutes. I mean, it was all going wrong, and all of a sudden they figured it out. So Tennessee's in. Texas is in. Georgia will be in, regardless of what happens in the SEC championship game. They're just playing for a bye at that point. But, same urgency as before. Yeah, not at all. But anyway, that's beside the point. So 3 teams are then in. So you then have this really difficult, tricky conversation which is Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. All of these teams are 9-3. Alabama beats Auburn 28-14, covers by half point. Ole Miss beat Mississippi State. It wasn't pretty, but they got it done. South Carolina beats Clemson. Clemson will fall down, but have a chance to go to the college football playoff, even though South Carolina might not. The difficult thing, everyone wants to talk about South Carolina, and I discussed them last week on the show because they're a red-hot football team. They're playing really well. Here's the problem. You know the two teams that are ranked ahead of them and are still ranked ahead of them by lieu of having, the same record? Ole Miss and Alabama. Spencer, why would Ole Miss and Alabama be ranked ahead? South Carolina's playing better football. Oh, that's right. South Carolina lost to both of those teams. Ole Miss went into Columbia and scorched them, just went into the place, lit it on fire, and then left. And they were able to get away with that because they were those meddling kids. But South Carolina went to Alabama, almost pulled it off, but they didn't. But they lose the football game. So if you want to put South Carolina in the playoff, you have to put both Alabama and Ole Miss in. The committee, I'm fingers crossed, the committee does not have the guts. This is not anti-South Carolina. This is pro-fairness. Pro-fairness. Think whatever you want about the LSU-South Carolina game. I don't think that was a fair call. What I do think is that the results at the end of the day have to matter. And yeah, I think it was a bad call. Guess what? Lots of games are impacted by bad calls. You know what type? Close ones. Close ones are affected by bad calls. There's always an opportunity. Even when an official blows a call here, you still usually have an opportunity to win the game over there. So South Carolina has lost convincingly to Ole Miss and close on the road against Alabama. If you put in South Carolina, both of those teams have to be in. Are you putting 6 SEC teams into the playoff? I don't think so. I don't know so, but I definitely don't think so. Because here are teams that I can tell you are locked into the playoff. Oregon, lock. Ohio State, lock. Texas, lock. Penn State, lock. Notre Dame, lock. Georgia, lock. Tennessee, lock. We're at 7. We're at 7, Monica Geller. Indiana, 11-1, lock. G5 champ, that'll be Boise State or UNLV. Mountain West Championship game, winner goes to the playoff. That's going to be phenomenal. Lock. There's 9. There's 9 teams in there. Do you have room for 3 more? Oh, wait, Spencer, you didn't say the Big 12 champ because we don't know who that's going to be yet. But let's say it's Arizona State. We're at 10. We're at 10. Does the committee put in South Carolina and say, we're just going to ignore that time they lost to Bama or Ole Miss because, well, they've been playing better the last half of the year. What does that say about the first 2 months of the regular season? What, it doesn't count? What, you get to yell do-over? You get to say, that doesn't matter. Who cares? No, every game counts here. So committee's going to have a whale of a time trying to figure out who gets in. Same debates that we were having in the 4-team era. It's just that now we're a bit further down and we're talking about 3-loss SEC teams. But yeah, that's what South Carolina is probably going to be thinking about once the final rankings are released, is they'll go, wow, what if we'd found a way to win that LSU game? Wow, what if we'd pulled it off against Alabama? They would have been a lock, absolute lock. South Carolina's a 9-3 football team and a darn good one. A darn good one. Beamer ball is alive and well. They have been playing some really, really good football. But this whole thing is just going to get so tremendously complicated. Just so tremendously complicated across the board because I don't know what you do. Because here's my objection to the Alabama argument. They're the highest ranked of the bunch. I mean, you could maybe make the case that, I don't know, it should be Ole Miss. Ole Miss, who lost to Florida. That's their bad loss. Bama's losses are at Vanderbilt, unranked, at Tennessee, top 10 team, at Oklahoma. At Oklahoma. Oklahoma stinks. They were 1-5 in the SEC going into that game. They didn't just win. They won 24-3. Refs took a touchdown off the board. Guess what? You still lost by multiple possessions on the road, admittedly. That makes it slightly tougher. That was not a good Oklahoma team. So the ranking of Ole Miss behind Alabama, maybe that changes. But how would it change if going into this week, you had Alabama 1 spot ahead of Ole Miss and they beat Auburn by 14 points? which is more impressive than beating Mississippi State by 12. Both teams were at home. Both teams won rivalry games, but Auburn's a better team than Mississippi State. And Ole Miss's losses, by the way, they're at least better than Bama's because they're at LSU, who's a good but not great team. At Florida, also a good but not great team. And hosting Kentucky. Well, that one's a bad loss. Guess what? The Kentucky loss is by 3 points. That's a better loss to me than Alabama getting toasted by Oklahoma. But none of those are good losses. None of those are good losses. So that's the conundrum. That's the conundrum. Is you're going to want South Carolina to be, oh, they deserve to be in. They're playing well. They're doing this. Which team are you going to ignore the head-to-head for? Or which of those teams are you putting into the playoff? Or are you putting both those teams into the playoff? I don't know. I want to run through that one more time just to make sure I've got my numbers. Oregon is in. Ohio State's in. Texas is in. Penn State is in. That's 4. Notre Dame is 5. Georgia's in. That's 6. Tennessee, 7. SMU's a lock, 8. Clemson could play a spoiler in there and be 9. Indiana should be in there and be 9. Group of 5 champ. Big 12 champ. I don't think you've got room for the 9-3 SEC. I hope you don't. I am clinging to as much urgency as we can maintain in the college football regular season because it is the greatest regular season product on planet Earth. But I suspect that 10-2 Miami gets the nod because they're 10-2. Well, but we're playing in the SEC. Yeah, well, guess what? The ACC's got a lot of wins over the SEC, and that gap doesn't appear to be what it used to. So you can dislike it. You can think it's wrong. You can think that all you want. The reality at the end of the day is Miami's got a better record. I think the committee's going to value that. Sitting there at 10-2, yeah, it wasn't a good loss, but how far do they drop? And Clemson could play spoiler. Clemson could make this simple for everyone. Clemson could make this simple for the committee. We'll just have to wait and find out to see what happens. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.